wartime plans that seem to be building in that region. Rest assured that we are working on this problem 24 hours. Our delegates are behind the scene,
Millions of Americans, I was terribly saddened to learn of the recent suicides of several teenagers across our country after being bullied because they were gay or because people thought they were gay. Children are particularly vulnerable to the hurt caused by discrimination and prejudice, and we've lost many young people over the years to suicide. These most recent deaths are a reminder that all Americans have to work harder to overcome bigotry and hatred. I have a message for all the young people out there who are being bullied or who feel alone and find it hard to imagine a better future. First of all, hang in there and ask for help. Your life is so important to your family, your friends, and to your country. And there's so much waiting.
CNN is reporting Thursday that U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said that Pakistan should put economic reforms into place to ensure financial support for victims of the recent floods. Clinton also called on Pakistan's wealthy to do their part. Clinton said at a meeting with EU and NATO officials in Brussels, quote, "The international community can only do so much. Pakistan itself must take immediate and substantial action to mobilize its own resources and in particular to reform its economy. The most important step that Pakistan can take is to pass meaningful reforms that will expand its tax base. The government must require that the economically affluent and elite in Pakistan support the government and people of Pakistan. It is absolutely unacceptable for those with means in Pakistan not to be doing their fair share to help their own people, while the taxpayers in Europe, the United States, and other contributing countries are all chipping in to do our part." For further updates...
If you could ask the question that you were not able to ask of Hillary Clinton, and then maybe answer it, or give your own comments on the Secretary's statement this afternoon.
I would like to talk about it because I think what we saw from Hillary Clinton was the unveiling of a new era of climate structural adjustment. For those of you unfamiliar with the term structural adjustment, is what the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank used to do. They still do it, but they don't use the term anymore because it's got such a bad reputation. But when poor countries would desperately need a loan, the World Bank or the IMF would give a list of conditions. Okay, we'll give you the loan, but only if you privatize your water and your electricity and you let our corporations in and just adjust yourself to our terms. This is a really, really hated phrase in the global south. But what Hillary Clinton just did is she walked into that meeting and she said, these are our terms. Kill Kyoto, no legally binding agreements, only transparency, whatever the hell that means. No global emission target, emission cut target, but everybody go off, make your national plan, and then we'll mash them together, which means there isn't a global goal. And also forget about the whole idea of historical responsibility. She even said something about how some people want to look back, but we want to look forward. Historical responsibility is a hugely important factor here in these negotiations because in the climate convention that the U.S. signed, it states clearly that the responsibility for solving the climate crisis rests primarily with the countries that created the crisis, the developed countries, the industrialized countries. Not that developing countries don't need to do anything, but that rich countries that created the climate crisis clearly have to take the lead. So she rejected that whole concept out of hand. She laid out the terms, and then she said, and we agreed to $100 billion for some climate fund, vaguely defined, that will be available to poor countries to deal with things like floods, droughts, malaria, by 2020. So here's the money, and she explicitly said, but the U.S. will not contribute anything unless you agree to these terms. So it was climate blackmail or climate structural adjustment. And my question is really, what about the principle that the polluter pays? In other words, who is the U.S. to set the terms of this agreement when in fact the U.S. as a country bears the greatest responsibility for the creation of the crisis. So this is what this phrase climate justice is all about. It's the idea that we have to look at historical responsibility, because then you have a much more equal negotiation, because countries come to the table with the idea that actually they're owed something because they're living the effects of a problem that they didn't create.
It's not about justice, it's not about agenda, it's not about mobilizing people, it's about dialing for corporate dollars. These two parties have sold the U.S. government and the American people to the highest bidders.